Gonzalo, thank you so much for joining us. Day one of Doha Forum 2022. I understand you've had a panel session this afternoon. Talk us through the discussion there that you had. What were the key topics there? What were the key takeaways?
It was a panel on sustainability of cities and how cities contribute to the solutions to climate change and global warming. And we had a very interesting panel because the cities contribute about close to 80% of greenhouse gases. They use 70% of the world's energy, but it's only 2% of the land area. So if we are to solve the climate problem, we need to start with cities, that's for sure. And we heard really interesting examples about that role and how that can be part of a climate solution. Something important is that in the climate debate, we're no longer talking primarily about negotiation, because it has been negotiated. Paris Agreement is there. It's about implementation. How do we get there? And what are the efforts? Not to avoid reaching 2 degrees, but actually 1.5 degrees of global warming.
Okay. What examples can we point to around the world of cities that are getting that right, countries that are getting that right in terms of sustainable urban development?
I think most countries are making real efforts to lower their emissions. And the pledges in Paris commit countries, even though it's voluntary, commit countries to reduce their emissions. And here in Qatar, we heard from the Minister of Environment that there is a commitment to reduce emissions by 25% by the year 2030. So that's a very ambitious target, ambitious goal. And it's really good to hear that Qatar is making those efforts and that they are putting in place, for example, a couple of solar energy plants, each 800 megawatts each. So in total, it's going to be 1.6 gigawatts. That's a lot of energy with solar panels.
Okay. Let's talk about rapidly urbanizing countries and those that perhaps are relatively poorer. How do they need to think differently about responsible, sustainable development?
Well, something that was also touched upon in the panel is the relation between economics and climate and energy. It's really about economics. And the solutions have to make sense from an economic perspective. But many of the technologies to lower emissions and to fight climate are also economically attractive to certain countries because you're going to be more efficient. So if you reduce waste and if you are more efficient with your energy use, you are probably going to reduce emissions anyway. So those are the types of solutions that poor countries need to take into account.
Excellent. And looking at action, today obviously is the first day of Doha Forum, but very important day for you in particular as well. We've got the launch of Earthna, Center for a Sustainable Future. Tell us a little bit about Earthna and tell us about what that means for sustainability and Qatar.
Sure. Earthna is a policy center within Qatar Foundation. And Qatar Foundation already has a very large ecosystem of research institutions, academic institutions that are finding solutions for sustainability. And what Earthna is going to do primarily is to draw the lessons from all of that research to try to formulate policies for sustainability, trying to help the government of Qatar find a pathway towards sustainability, but also becoming an example in arid environments of how that can be achieved. So we're going to have a very important international dimension because the solutions that we can find here can also be useful to other countries in similar climates. So that's one part. The other thing that is very important is, of course, the role of Qatar in the international energy markets because of the gas. So Qatar is the largest exporter of liquefied gas, and even though it is a fossil fuel that emits greenhouse gases, it is much more efficient than other fossil fuels, which means that gas is going to be part of a solution to a lowering emissions globally.
Okay. And what role would the private sector have in the ambitions of the center and achieving the ambitions of it?
Yeah, it's really a work of everybody. It's academics, it's the private sector, it's government, it's cities. Everybody has to do their part. Private sector is critical because any technological solutions in the future are going to have to be financially sustainable as well. So it's not just environmental sustainability, but also economic sustainability.
Okay. Let's look a little bit broader now and looking at what distinguishes sustainability policy and the implementation of sustainable technology in high and low income countries and the global south and the global north? What does that difference look like?
The challenges are different because there are countries that are already meeting basic human needs, and therefore they can afford to invest in technologies that are very advanced, even if they are expensive. Whereas there are countries, especially in the south, where people are not meeting their basic needs. So you have to worry about food security, water sanitation, and you have to embed the climate solutions within those challenges, and that, of course, makes it more difficult. But on the other hand, those countries don't emit much. So even though you have to do an effort there, you have to make an effort, those countries are emitting a very small fraction of the greenhouse gases.
Okay. And we've already seen, obviously, talks earlier on the unique role of cities and urban centers in building a sustainable future. What do you envision that future looks like, and how will the lifestyle of citizens within those cities actually change?
In the end, it has to be about well-being. So solving the climate crisis is about avoiding the consequences that are very bad for people and economies. But those solutions, to be sustainable, have to benefit your own lifestyle, your own life-being. So you have to feel comfortable within those solutions. It is about making cities much more friendly to people that walk, trying to promote better transport systems, trying to promote communities that are more resilient because people can interact with each other, as opposed to many cities where you have huge distances, you have to use cars, and those cities are really not friendly to humans. So a sustainable city is a city where people feel better, and that in the end results in better health as well.
Okay. I think when we talk about kind of modernizing cities for sustainability, it's inevitable that you've got to talk about smart technologies. What can you tell us about that, and perhaps the work that Earthna is doing as well in that area?
Well, technology can really help a lot. You don't need to be very far to realize that right now, if you want to move from point A to point B, you get your phone and you can use an app to get transport, right? So that's just an example of how technology can help. But technology comes afterwards. The technology cannot be the driver of the solution. Technology has to be there to solve a specific problem. And if that problem is transport or is emissions or is walkability or something, then you have to think about what the solution is first, and then the technology will come and support that.
Okay.
And let me add, you asked about the private sector. That's where entrepreneurship comes into place. That's where you have to allow invention and innovation to play a role here as well.
Absolutely. Can you point to any examples of innovations that you've heard or that you're involved with at the moment that really deserve to be highlighted?
Well, we didn't get into the details within the panel, but something having to do, for example, with electric cars. Right? Electric cars 20 years ago was impossible to think about. And now many car manufacturers, and there are some brands that have been built exclusively around the concept of the electric car, and people are now driving electric cars. And there is a cycle, a virtuous cycle, where you have the electric cars, then there is demand for chargers, then governments start to install chargers, so therefore there are more electric cars and so on, and then that's how you get the electric car getting into the system. And there are many cities now where you do have quite a bit of electric cars going around, but you have to provide the right incentives, and there has to be the policies to be able to get there.
Yeah, that incentivization is really important, and when it comes to mobility as well, I think there's another thread to this. Is not only electric vehicles, but also changing perceptions of mobility and car ownership as well, in terms of car sharing. We've seen the rise of a lot of apps, certainly, that allow you to car share. So that's not owning a car, and sharing that vehicle obviously minimizes the impact.
Yes.
How important is that element? How important is that about incentivizing and convincing people to essentially change their lifestyles, which is surely a very difficult task. There's some, grounding in human psychology there.
Yeah, it's about incentive. People. Something very important to understand in policy making is that people are smart. Okay, sometimes you think, oh, they are doing that, and that's not right. Well, people are smart, and people choose to do things. And in order for that choice to be sustainable, there has to be the right incentive. So very many incentives have to do with taxes. You can have incentive with economic incentives. Car sharing is one possibility. Now certainly driving your car alone is very inefficient because you have 3 or 4 other seats that are empty. Yeah. So carpooling is part of the solution. And that's been done in many cities around the world where you prohibit cars that are not car sharing. Sometimes you can only drive if you have at least 2 people in the car or 3 people in the car. And then that policy forces people to do the carpooling. So that's an example of how the right policy and the right incentives can help change people's behavior.
Tell us then what we can expect from Earthna in the coming weeks and the coming months and coming years. What's the plan there?
Well, our vision is to be a force that promotes sustainability in arid environments. It's to be able to digest and make sense of all of the research that is going on already in the Education City, Qatar Foundation, and in Qatar, so that sensible policies can be developed and that the government can find those policies useful. In addition to that, the international dimension where those experiences can be shared and we can learn as well from other experiences. So there is also a very strong advocacy dimension to all of this, both national advocacy but also international advocacy. And in this first year, we're going to be sharpening the programs, better defining our niche, and we have planned a very large sustainability summit for next year around March, where we will be bringing people from different parts of the world to talk about these issues and to share experiences.